everyone. Welcome back. It's another edition of the Wobcast 2.0. I am your host, Wobby. It's Mike Wobshaw, joined by my usual cast of characters, Giles and Chase. Episode 17 of the Wobcast 2.0, pillaged by the Packers. Ouch, 41-17 at Lambeau Field. A house of horrors ordinarily for the Minnesota Vikings, very much so. Last weekend, as the Vikings lose the game and fall to 12-4. On episode 17 of the Wobcast 2.0, we will review the blowout at Lambeau and the implications it has for the Minnesota Vikings with the playoffs fast approaching. We'll take a quick peek at the Chicago Bears, the Vikings' next opponent and final opponent of the regular season. And of course, we'll talk playoffs before we get you out of here on episode 17 of the Wobcast 2.0. We're glad you're here and we're glad you're listening. But let's begin this episode, guys, by acknowledging the somber and scary way that week 17 came to a conclusion. And that was the injury to Damar Hamlin of the Buffalo Bills very early on in the Monday Night Football game between the Bills and the Bengals. Let's talk about that a little bit. Of course, primary in everyone's mind is the health of Damar and of everyone involved there. And I know that's certainly what you guys were thinking about too on Monday night and Tuesday and even still today. I was sitting at home watching the game. I actually had to get in my car and drive and pick up someone from Boy Scouts, pick up our son from Boy Scouts. So while I was doing that, like I've got the game on the radio and like I left like right after this happened, so like my eyes were glued to the TV, but I had to go. So it's like I was listening to it on the radio, get back home and it's still kind of going on. And eventually it got to the point where I'm like, we're not going to really learn anymore tonight. So like, I'm, going to turn this off and carry on and then wake up in the morning and try and catch some updates, but definitely a where were you moment, I think, for football fans. Seeing that thing go down. So what was your guys' experience watching that unfold?
Yeah, that was super heavy. I know there's a psychological law, so to speak, that happens when you experience something traumatic, whether it happens to you or it happens to someone else. As long as you're involved, it presents a level of shock. That definitely happened to me. It was like, is this actually happening? Like almost like you flip the channel, like, oh, did I actually go to the wrong channel? I'm watching something else. Super unfortunate for everyone involved. It was just tough all the way around.
Yep.
But glad to hear that seemingly things are trending in the right direction for his health.
It appears that way. Yep.
So that's obviously a huge godsend because there was definitely moments there where that may not necessarily have been super likely.
Yeah. Yeah. It had a different, we watch enough games, you see guys get carted off and sometimes you even see an ambulance on the field. I'd say maybe once a season you see that. I don't know really what the number would be, but like we've seen that. But this always, from the very moment you saw it, it had a different look and feel to it. And maybe someone with a keen medical sense knew it was a cardiac event right away. I didn't know that right away. I immediately went to head injury, and it might have been that too. We may find out that it was that also. But clearly it became a cardiac breathing event when they said that CPR was being administered for 9 minutes. And that to me was the chilling moment where I'm like, whoa.
This is serious.
Yeah. And it's always serious when someone gets hurt. But I mean, CPR for 9 minutes on the field, bad deal. So hoping he can pull through and recover, not just in a football sense, in a everyday life functionality sense first. Hopefully he can fully recover. And then secondarily, would be great to see him back on a field. That would be an inspirational story, but that's neither here nor there for now. For now, it's getting that guy conscious and get him back up full speed as soon as they can. So thoughts and prayers with him on that situation, a tough one. And a part of the game that we all love is injuries, but not to that level, right?
No, I completely agree. It's a whole nother level. I think whenever you see another player from another team get hurt, you're like, oh man, it'll be easier for us to win. And usually it's like they twisted their ankle or something, which is maybe too revealing, but like usually it's just something relatively minor. But this, everyone involved recognized pretty quick that this is a different story. This is very serious. It's not just them tweaking an ankle and have to go out for a couple plays. Like this is big.
Yeah. So I know you guys and people listening to us have been thinking about this and watching it for a long time. and certainly have Damar Hamlin's health and well-being primary for a concern. So that's how everyone feels about it. Less important, but still important, is week 18 and what happens to that Bills Bengals game and what's the impact on the standings and the rest of the league. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And so if you don't have the stomach or appetite quite yet for that, we hope to see you on the next episode of the Wobcast 2.0. But the rest of this one, after wishing Damar Hamlin well, we're gonna talk football. And for us, most important in that conversation is the Minnesota Vikings. And coming off a very difficult performance to watch, guys, the final score was 41-17. It felt like it was 41-0 at the end of the game. Like the two touchdowns they scored to me were meaningless, and that was we got pillaged. That's the episode, or the title of the episode. It was a drubbing at the hands of a team that had a lot to lose in the Green Bay Packers, and they refused to do so. And they came out and performed really well. Initial overall thoughts on that performance. What's your level of panic, Giles, after watching that, knowing what was on the line?
That's a really good question, because I went into that game thinking it was a big opportunity for us in a lot of categories, to show off to the national media, to show off to our conference that we are in charge, and even to ourselves that we have the ability to go to the distance. And hindsight's 2020, that did not happen. That was a big loss at center stage. And I do mean that as a very careful transition. I think when I think about my level of panic, although that was a drubbing, that was a pillaging, I don't necessarily let that affect my long-term view, long-term as in the rest of the season, of the Minnesota Vikings. Because I think some very specific things went wrong that made everything snowball into a very, very poor performance. The first is Austin Slutman getting hurt, and us putting in not only our second, but our third string center, one that's he was not prepared. And I get it, he's our third string guy. I don't mean to be mean, but he was very clearly not prepared. He's never played center a day in his life, at least in an NFL snap. So I get part of it. But he caused the train wreck of many plays. He snapped the ball too early. He snapped the ball too late. He threw it off time to Kirk where he almost fumbled it. Like, there was some very severe issues with that. And I think it's hard for any team in the NFL to win a game like that against a defense like that with a third string center. Like, not many teams are going to be able to overcome that, especially our team. I think we have a lot of strengths, a lot of weaknesses, especially as you isolate that to the quarterback position. Kirk is who he is. We've talked about that all season. He has a lot of big highs. He has some relatively low lows. And one of those is he needs to be protected. And we got rid of one of the most important positions in the offensive line. I mean, maybe you would disagree, but I've always viewed the center position as one of the smartest guys on the team, one of the toughest guys on the team, because you're having to call out protections. Although the quarterback can override that decision, it's your job to call protections, keep the snap count. That's your role, and he failed. In my opinion, I'm not saying that we would have won had those things not happen, but I do think we lost because that happened, if that makes sense. I think both can be true. I'm not saying that we should have won that game, but we definitely lost it because of that. So that's my first take. I have a few other thoughts about the game.
Okay, well, let's get to those. I think you're right, though, about the center position being one of the most important, or the guy being one of the smartest. And the importance of that position is twofold. Because first of all, you need to know the play and what not just you need to do, but what the guys next to you are doing, what the tackles are doing. Where to slide the back in protection, all that. Like, so it's the mental, it's the chess game. So you got to play chess. Okay. And 90% of that chess game is pre-snap. Okay. But instantly when that game is over, you also now are in the middle of the trenches, which is the toughest place to play in the game to begin with. So you have that huge game to play pre-snap, and once the ball is snapped, now you got another big one to play. And by the way, you're going against like a 350 or 330, 320 pound lineman most of the time, right?
Kenny Clark is a beast.
and you're starting with literally one hand, on the ground, on the football, and the other guy is starting full bore. So, I mean, it is an extremely difficult position to play mentally and then physically all at the same time. And you didn't even have your backup center. You had your third string center doing it.
And you're behind at that point.
Right.
So now you have that added pressure that not only am I trying to maintain the lead, I need to come back.
Yeah. And so, not to like overemphasize the importance of this position or make too extreme of a position out of it, but like, you're almost more hampered when that happens to you than if you took, Adam Thielen out or Dalvin Cook out. I would say you are more hampered,
especially in our offense.
Yeah. So that was a big deal when that happened. It didn't help that Brian O'Neill also got hurt, So yeah, it was a snowball effect for sure.
Even how that relates to the game plan, because you go into the game plan planning protections. Obviously, you shift those on the fly sometimes, but now you cannot rely on the entire right side of your offensive line like you may have planned to.
Yeah. So, the Vikings took enough bullets on Sunday, Giles, but I'm going to throw some more at you. I had a bad feeling about the game, though, even before all that happened. Like, great that they got points right away early and took a 3-0 lead, but to start inside the 5 the way they did, I think they started on the 1 and not get a touchdown out of that, and then to give up a kickoff return after that, I thought right there that was a bad omen for the game. I was already wondering if Green Bay was going to be able to, probably win this game, a lot on the line. It's Aaron Rodgers at home in December/January. It just felt like a good spot for Green Bay. And then those things happened very early on. And I was like, I think this has a shot to be Green Bay's day. So even before the injuries up front, Giles, I thought the Vikings were really up against it.
Yeah, I definitely shared that opinion throughout the course of the game, because you could feel it slipping through our fingers. Now, when I look at games and when I look at the things that fail, I try to take it from a very logical perspective on what is fixable, what is not. Is this something to be concerned about, or is this more or less a fluke, right? Because fluky things are going to happen in the NFL. It just happens, period. You can't take them away. You can't give them back. Like, they just happen. But also, it's not necessarily something to expect moving forward when you think about the process element of a team. And when I looked at this game, and correct me if you would disagree with this, because this is kind of a take, it's not fact, but I think, and it's going to sound a little bit crazy, but I think the cleats on the Minnesota Vikings feet played a far bigger role in us losing the game than a lot of people recognize. I think early in the week, it wasn't super widely reported, but Kevin O'Connell issued a request to the team that, hey, I forget the exact type of cleat, but I think you should wear this cleat on this turf because it's going to be slippery. It's going to be cold out. Here's what we recommend. I think he did the right call on not requiring that, because it really is a damned if you do, damned if you don't type scenario, where if you wear the wrong cleat and you're not or if you wear the wrong cleat, you might slip around. But if you wear the right cleat but you're not comfortable with it, you can get injured, right? If you're not comfortable, that's very dangerous, especially in this game, especially for someone like Justin Jefferson. And when you go into the analysis of this game from that perspective, that a lot of the players did not follow the advice of the coach. Not saying they made the wrong decision, but they did not follow the advice. Or at least almost all the plays that I saw that gave up big plays or us not being able to complete a red zone touchdown, there was a ton of slipping and sliding going around. And when you look at the Green Bay Packers, none of them were sliding. Now, I'm not saying, like, once again, they would have won the game if they wore different cleats, but I do think that made them lose. I think when you think about, they were relatively even teams, if you want to call a spade a spade. Maybe the Vikings were a little bit better in some positions, Packers and others. But I think cleats took them down a notch or two, where they were having to play against themselves on top of an already difficult game. Sure. Does that make sense?
Yep, that makes sense. And when home field advantage is talked about, I think more times than not, people think about crowd noise. And after crowd noise, people might think about travel, like airplane to bus, to hotel bed, to just being off routine. Secondarily, when people think about home field advantage, I think they think about that. Now, home teams stay in the hotel the night before a game too, so but whatever, that's neither here nor there. But what you're talking about is actually a more practical function of home field advantage, maybe than the traveling on an airplane and a bus and a hotel room is. And that is, footing, familiarity with the playing surface, the wind conditions, whatever it might be.
Predictability.
So interesting take. I wouldn't poke many holes in that. I truthfully, I didn't know some of the detail or nuance of that had happened. I know O'Connell recommended certain footwear. I didn't know what the response was from the team and who was and who wasn't doing it. You're totally right that's a damned if you do, damned if you don't proposition for the coach, right? Because all you can do is there in that situation is what O'Connell did and recommend it, right? So,
and we also had some injuries throughout the game.
Yep.
Now I haven't confirmed that Brian O'Neill was wearing the right cleats, but if he was, that's an unfortunate scenario.
Yep, it is. And so I kind of sense where you're going right now, Giles, with the game being 41-3 at one point, ending 41-17. Packers are hot, Vikings are cold, the playoffs are coming. Vikings fans being predispositioned to anticipate a letdown and panic coming into the picture here for folks, but you're not sensing that. Two of your first two takes were about injuries up front and, probably going to have Garrett Bradbury back for the playoffs. Looks like O'Neill, perhaps not. Footing / home field advantage will not be a problem for the Vikings in the playoffs, at least not in the first round. So I kind of sense where you're going here, that you're not panicking, that you're not overly concerned about what happened in Lambeau Field. But if you had more observations to get to, let's hit them now.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely correct. I'm not concerned moving forward. Now, I'll explain why, because I think normally if the offensive line, or at least half of it, went out an injury, that'd be a big concern for me. And normally I would say our season's over, because our quarterback is Kirk Cousins, and among a lot of things, he needs to be protected if we're going to be able to score and move the ball. So normally I would say, this is not going to work well. Chris Reed, we're going to go to him first, because he's going to be more than likely the backup center until Garrett Bradbury comes back. Now, I'm hoping that he comes back for the playoffs, but for the sake of this argument, we'll assume that he's not coming back anytime soon. Because they haven't mentioned anything about him. I'm hoping that he does, but at least for the Bears game, we have Chris Reed. Chris Reed has never played center before, period. And I don't mean that as a slight against him. It's just a matter of reality. He has not played center before, other than in practice and preseason. He has, however, played guard. So it's not like he's a tackle moving inside to center. So he has the build like a center. In fact, he has the build of a lot of amazing centers. When you look at the physicality of a great center, if you're looking at the physical piece of a center, he fits that mold. But really, the center position requires two things. It requires a physicality. It requires a specific mentality. Now, he was unprepared, period. That is his fault. He was not prepared for the snap count. He was not prepared to play the center position. However, when I think about preparation, that doesn't mean necessarily laziness. That means you prepared wrong. I am interested to see if he can fix the mentality piece by the Bears game, or if he can learn the snap count. If he needs to go over to Kirk Cousins' house every night this week and practice in the backyard, do it. Get up to speed on the snap counts, because when it comes to the physicality, I am not concerned about Chris Reed. He was actually above average, if not elite, when he was with the Indianapolis Colts when Quentin Nelson went down as a guard. He, I believe, graded out above a 70 in pass protection. He was a great guard when he didn't have to snap the ball. So, physicality-wise, is he elite in every category? No, but I don't view him as a train wreck that most people might view him as. Now, I'm going to put an asterisk by that. If he can fix the mental piece, if he can go to Kirk Cousins' house every night this week and fix the snap count, I don't see it as much of an issue as most people are looking at it. I may be proven wrong, but that's my position. I'm not as concerned in that, especially if we can get Garrett Bradbury back by the playoffs. So that covers the interior side of the offensive line. Moving out to the outside. Unfortunately, Brian O'Neill is out for the season. Technically, if he's out for the minimum amount of time and his injury is just minimal enough, he could come back for the Super Bowl if we make it. That is when he is eligible to come back. When we're playing the Kansas City Chiefs or maybe the Buffalo Bills for a rematch. But outside of that, he is not playing. So we need to be able to make it the distance without Brian O'Neill. So in comes Oli Udoh. Now, that is a swear word in a lot of Minnesota Vikings households, right? He is not a great conversation piece when it came to his performance last year at guard. But I do want to emphasize that. He was playing guard. He is a tackle.
He's a tackle for sure. I was
He
around
is a
him. I know
tackle.
him. Yep.
Yeah,
He's a
he's
tackle.
a big old dude. He is not only very, very tall, he's very, very stout. He also, I believe, is in the 99th percentile in the NFL for wingspan. Like he is the almost the epitome of building the perfect physicality for a tackle. Now, can he learn the position because he hasn't really played that much? That will be ceased to be seen. But it's not like he will have the same issues that he had playing guard. Because really, when you're playing guard, you want to be more shorter and stout, and you want to have a low center of gravity.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
he's a guy
Yep.
that already sets pretty high, and he's obviously a big dude. So it was
Yeah.
a lot to ask him to play guard. And all the things that happened to him, I almost expected. Like you're asking a big tackle, to play guard. Those are the issues that are going to have happen. He's gonna get caught holding because people are going to get by him because he's too big. All that to say, I'm not concerned about him playing tackle. In fact, I'm actually cautiously optimistic. Now, I'm going to reveal one of the PFF grades. It's not in the top 5, but it's also not in the bottom 5. Ola Udo graded out at a 69.8 PFF grade
Yeah.
throughout the course of the game.
Coming
He had
in
a
short
74
notice.
pass
Yep.
protection pass protection grade.
That's
He
pretty
wasn't
dang
a
good.
train wreck.
Yeah, it's not at all. Not even close, right?
Yeah.
If you're just looking at the grade, yeah.
Yeah.
Um.
So yeah.
So, what you need to avoid though is, and I don't know how they would weight this, but like we talk about this with pass rushers, and I think we need to talk about this with pass protectors too, where it's like, and we were talking about this with some of the Vikings rushers a couple of weeks ago, where they weren't grading well, but I think it was Danielle Hunter, but he had a strip sack in the game, and I'm like, Danielle can have 17 bad snaps, but if he's got 2 strip sacks in that game, I mean, his grade might have been 58, but he had 2 strip sacks in the game. So, I mean, he affected the game, right? And so the inverse can be true with Oli. So it's like, great, 74 pass pro, but like if he has 1 or 2 catastrophic plays, that can ruin the game. So as long as you can manage your way around that, it sounds like Udo's got, for the balance of the game, has a shot to, have a good accounting of himself. And if he did it short notice, spur of the moment on the road at Lambeau, he can definitely do it with a week of prep against the Bears, and most certainly can do it at home with 2.5 weeks of prep for the Giants.
Yep. And my biggest request of anyone on the offensive line, don't be a train wreck.
Yeah.
Like, we were doing great there for a while where we had premier bookend tackles. Christian Darrisaw may be the best left tackle in business. You may disagree, but he's one of the best.
He's up
Ryan
there.
O'Neal was the top 10 at least.
I think I had him number 2. Yeah.
I think he's number 1, but that's neither here nor there.
You were a big Trent Williams guy, though. Before we had Darrisaw, you also wanted Trent Williams.
Trent Williams is a showstopper. I completely agree.
Yeah.
I'm partially letting salary cap affect that when I think about the best tackle, because Christian Darrisaw is on a rookie contract, and I view Trent Williams and Christian Darrisaw in the same conversation. But
for sure.
comparing, it's splitting hairs. But the point is, we had great scenario with bookend tackles because Brian O'Neill was another amazing tackle. Both were top 10 in my opinion when it comes to tackles. So now we don't have that. We don't have a top 10 right tackle. So it is what it is. I just need our right tackle not to be a train wreck, because I think when you look at years past when Kirk Cousins really, really struggled, he struggled when we had a train wreck position. I can deal if all of them grade out at a 55 or a 60. The issue is when they start grading out at a 29 or a 43, right? Where you were a train wreck, because then we can't overcome that pressure. As long as we have just enough time to throw the ball, I think we can muddle our way through this, especially considering we have a super creative head coach that understands that this is now a limitation. Let's go scheme around this.
Yeah, I think Brad Childress always said about the quarterbacks, like one of the first things is, can you make the routine plays routinely? And I think what you're saying is, Oli, Chris Reed, the routine things, you need to be able to do it routinely. We have to count on you to do that every time, because you're right, Giles. Predictability matters, and if you know what you have to manage around and you know who you have to game plan for or against, that is a big positive. It's the surprises and the troughs, the valleys. That's what can kill you. So I think that you're coming at this with a reasonable approach, a sensible approach to it. I think it'd be really easy to panic with, Brian O'Neill out third string or backup center playing. Like that's panic area for a lot of folks who don't just who watch football and don't just watch where the ball goes. They watch other things. They could panic about this situation.
Yep.
I think you're coming at it with a sensible approach. And I absolutely think, for as much of a Mike Zimmer guy as I was and am, I think that he would be able to manage his way through similar situations like this on defense. On offense, it is absolutely an advantage for the Vikings that they have Kevin O'Connell, who, as you said, Giles, is creative. He's not hard-headed or stubborn. He's innovative and creative and open-minded, and that's going to allow him the potential to get around this. Not saying he will, but he's going to have the potential to do so because of that sort of, he's got that, I think creativity is the right word for it, but he's just got the ability to be open-minded. He's not like, this is the way we do things because it's how we've always done it, and it's always how we're going to do it. He doesn't have that yet. He's like creative and open-minded, and I think he's going to find a way to scheme around this. The more difficult one is the center. I think the right tackle is the easier one. You're not asking right tackles to call out signals. You're not asking them to, pull or trap much. They got to look out for a stunt here and there, but you're a little more out on an island there, and it's all about athleticism. The center is the difficult one. And hopefully he's got, his sleeping bag at the Cousins residence this week, and, he's getting on the same page with the quarterback.
I could not agree more. I think they will know pretty quickly throughout the course of this week if it'll work or not. It'll either be fine, like, once he got practice, he was fine with the snap counts, or it'll be clear, this isn't going to work. And that's where I think the rubber will really meet the road with Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. Do you just decide, all right, well, it is what it is. We were hoping for better, but this is the cards that we were dealt, so we got to move forward with it? Or does he try to go make a move to further continue this run towards a Super Bowl in 2022? Now, this is pure speculation, but the name J.C. Tretter comes to mind. He was a huge name in the offseason. There was even rumors that he had called the Vikings saying, hey, I'm willing to play with you. And there was rumors back that we apparently didn't even call him back. Now, there were people that were for and against it all over the board, people that weren't believers in Garrett Bradbury. But now, having seen what they were able to do with Garrett Bradbury, I partially understand why they didn't pursue J.C. Tretter, especially considering what his cap hit would have been. But if they determine that Chris Reed is not the guy, if that happens, I'm not saying it will, but if it does, if he's not the guy and Garrett Bradbury is not able to come back for at least half of the playoff games, I'm interested to see if the Vikings would make a call to J.C. Tretter and say, hey, come out of retirement for 4 games. You were already one of the best centers in football. Well, I mean, your cap hit is already going to be smaller simply because you're going to be playing a smaller sample size. You've gotten a full season, so to speak, to rest up. Come play with us for a few games, because Kwesi already has a relationship with JC. There's a whole slew of connections there. Do we try to make a run at this?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I think if that happens, it's a pretty, that's a big indictment on what they think of Chris Reed being able to do that. Bringing a guy off. We talked about this with Odell Beckham Jr., although he's coming off of an injury, not just a layoff, but also an injury. Tretter, I don't believe is. He's just kind of a layoff. Very difficult, though, to come in off the street like that in that spot and, and make it work. But again, if it's just so terrible that you can't stand it with Reed, it's certainly a consideration. So,
yeah. Because, I mean, if he's maintained his physicality throughout the offseason, if he's maintained a good position, he was one of the best, if not the best, pass protector in the center position in all the National Football League for like the last 5 or 6 seasons. So like, even if you can get a percentage of that, you are maybe even upgrading in a certain capacity, where now that gives you a little bit more leverage to be able to make a run this year. But that's all speculation. I really hope that Chris Reed is able to show up in that category, because another reckless speculation, if he does pick it up, if he's able to figure out the snap count and actually perform in the run and the pass, you can make an argument that he could win the center job for next year, because Garrett Bradbury's in a contract year. And maybe they re-sign him, maybe they don't, but if Chris Reed shows up, there's a chance that maybe they continue with him. Now that's speculation and that requires him to play well, but if he's able to pick it up, he may be able to win himself a job next year.
Interesting. Yep. And it would be a little bit of a loss to, I don't know that you would say in that scenario, Giles, that Bradbury was a miss. You can kind of maybe say that because he was a first round pick, but it's a significant hit if it happens on the Chris Reed side of things, right? That's a hit, so that's off-season fodder. That's off-season episode of the Wobcast that will definitely be a topic that we address. And we'll see what happens next week against the Bears. That'll be a little bit of a litmus test for whatever solution the Vikings want to try first for the first round of the playoffs, because we know now that they will be playing in the first round of the playoffs and they'll be playing at home. So they're going to have to come up with a solution pretty fast. Anything else offensively from Vikings Packers debacle that we need to hit before we talk grades?
No, honestly, I mean, This is kind of a throwaway game. Though so many things went wrong, it's hard to really throw a litmus test at this.
Isn't it interesting that so many of the wins are close one-score wins and the losses are just atrocious, like throwaway, draw a line through it anomalies? Isn't that? It's weird.
That is very interesting. I almost have two takes from that, because one, it seems like they go in with a pretty strong game plan, and in a lot of scenarios it worked. Like, this is our creativity getting applied. We're going to go attack this team this way, and we're going to make it happen. And we're good on the fringes, so we make it happen. So that's point number one. Point number two, a common denominator, at least among at least two of the losses, we had offensive line injuries mid-game.
Okay. Yeah,
and
that's true.
That
Dallas
train wrecked the game.
Yeah, Dallas and Green Bay for sure. Detroit, I don't remember. But yeah, you're right. And the Dallas one was the left tackle. I mean, anyone could see that issue.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's also important to look at those games in a vacuum in some sense, because some people look at that huge disparity in score, like 3-41. Oh my gosh, you got trucked. Well, the Cowboys, for this example, had a full 4 quarters to score that many points. We put in our backups like in the middle of the third quarter, so really we played a half of a game. So we weren't in it to go score a bunch more points. You know what I mean? So it is hard to say, oh, well, there's that big of a point differential. We lost the game. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to excuse the Vikings, but it's easier to look at those games and say, whoa, it was way worse than it was, when really we decided to give up midway through. And you could make even the same argument among the Packers game, is that it got a hand pretty quickly, and then they needed to make a decision. Do we try to win the game or do we give up? And then more injuries started happening and the game gets away from you, right? So then a snowball effect happens. So I do think it is really interesting to see our team kind of handle games that way, and I'm hoping that we can prevent those come playoff time, because I think if you can prevent the snowball effect, I really, truly think we have the ability to go toe-to-toe with any team in the NFL. We have the ability to score games. We have the ability to open up our playbook to really be creative and attack a team in a lot of different ways. However, when you get behind by 40 points, you become very one-dimensional very quick. You cannot win games that way.
Well, I think it's interesting. You said if we can stop the snowball effect from happening, the way I would finish that sentence is, they can come back and win. I mean, they did it. I mean, there's been so many of them. I think, I don't think if you were another team playing the Vikings, and your team was up 14-17 or 20-24, with any sort of significant chunk of time left, you would say, well, no lead is safe against this team this year, right? I mean, that's what you would say. So this team does have the ability to come back and the will to come back and the confidence that they can do it. So yeah, you're right. If you can prevent the snowball effect, you're probably going to be in the game to win the game at the very end. It's going to come down to the last possession. That's what, 80% of the Vikings season has been. And the playoffs are more likely to be that way anyway. So it stands to reason the Vikings are going to be in some nail biters once the postseason arrives. So,
and if I were to remove your memory from this entire past game, and I told you the game ended like 27-17, I think people have a very different opinion of what this game was. Like, oh, it was a somewhat of a close game, but we couldn't come back, right? Versus, oh, you got blown out. And when I look at this game, at least 14, if not 17 of the points happened in a fluke capacity. Now, we can't give them away or take them back, right? They happened. But one was a punt return kickback. I mean, that's hard to predict, and those are kind of fluky. An interception for a pick six. People were slipping around, missing tackles. Like, those are fluky things. So really, I mean, had those things not happened, it's a much closer game. Really, I mean, I think we were able to stop them in a lot of categories. When you think about even the major categories of a game, when you think about yards per play, yards per pass attempt, yards per rush attempt, total yards achieved, most people don't recognize this, but the Vikings won in every single one of those categories, except for points. We won we had more yards per attempt, more yards per pass attempt, more yards per rush attempt. We were winning. And that also is partially a credit to defense, but more of an admiration to the offense. We were doing a relatively decent job considering we just made too many mistakes and let it snowball.
Yeah. And the stats on if you give up a special teams touchdown, the chances of you winning are, I don't know what I used to know this when I was inside the ropes. I don't know what they are now, but it was like you're an 85% winner if you score on special teams. If you score on defense, you're like a 75% winner. I mean, you do both. I mean, you got to figure in the upper 90s, right? And then tack on, and you don't score a touchdown when you're on the one. You give up a pick six, you give up a kickoff return. I mean, that is a snowball effect right there. I mean, I don't know how you overcome that, and they didn't. So, I'm curious on the grades on offense, though, Giles. Before we touch on a few things defensively, because I don't want to stop talking about this game and move on to the Bears and the Giants until we talk defense too for the Vikings. But before we do that, let's go to the grades on offense.
So I am going to preface this with the two top players. They are Jalen Nailor and Nick Mullins. Now, they played a very, very small sample size, but they graded out at a respective 96.0 for Jalen Nailor and a 90.0 for Nick Mullins.
Okay.
Can't really commend them too much, but they didn't train wreck, I guess is the point. So that gives me some confidence in our backups. I think Jalen Nailor has a good future with us. So outside of the top two, now we're going to go down to the next three, if we consider the top three for most of the starters. Who do you think had the best games? Chase, do you have an opinion?
That's hard. Did KJ score that second touchdown?
Ding, 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 ding. He was the number one overall graded player with a 75.8 grade.
That's the only one I got, though. I did not see a lot of good, anything worthy of top three from anyone else. So I'll leave this one to Wabi.
KJ for sure was on my list because he caught every target. I thought he looked good and had a good game. I think Hawkinson's got to be up there. No? Yeah.
Number two. He graded out at a 73.0 grade.
Yep. I thought Hawkinson looked good. And then I don't know. The other one, I was sure on Hawkinson and Osborne. The other one I'd be guessing on, and I would go to the tried and true Darisaw.
He was just outside of that. He graded out at a 65.4 grade. He had a little bit of a rough game in the run game. I'm meaning to go back in the tape and look at what happened. Did fine in pass protection, but got dinged a little bit in the run game. So it was a overall 65.4 grade. Okay. So it was not him. I will give you a hint. This is technically not a starter on our offense, but a contributor.
Madison?
Ding, ding, ding. He was the third overall graded player with a 71.6 grade. Did pretty good, honestly. I think he's earning himself another contract. Unfortunately, it's probably not going to be in purple, but I think he's going to be a starter potentially somewhere around the NFL. He's been a great backup. It's been exciting to see him, flourish in that capacity. He's had a pretty decent year. So we got KJ, TJ, and Alexander Madison for our top three PFF graded players.
Let's get off topic a little bit here.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned Madison. Are we sure that Dalvin's here next year And what's the contract going to be for Madison? Because I would hear an argument of trade the superstar and give Madison the money, save money there, and use those resources elsewhere.
So I'm hearing what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think you could get back for Dalvin?
Not what you would hope or think.
Not like a Christian McCaffrey.
No, I don't think you get that type of compensation back at all. Do you?
Mm-hmm. I don't think so.
Yeah,
I might have had a different answer at the beginning of this season because I was expecting them to use him a lot more, both in the run and the pass. I expected him to be more of a wide back this year, and they haven't. And I can't tell if they're saving that in their playbook for playoff time or if that's simply not working. Because I was expecting him to be Todd Gurley because I still think he has it. I think he's still a fast player. I think he's very elusive. He knows how to read lanes very, very well. He is an elite running back. He's not top 1 or 2 or even 3 yet still, but he is still a great running back. But I don't think he commands Christian McCaffrey type picks, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you this. Again, we're going off into the offseason right now. We need to stay on task here, but this is a juicy one. I wonder if the Rams have a 2nd round pick this year. They've done a lot of trading, so I don't know if they do. But the Rams have had a hard time here at running back. And the Rams love to acquire a proven commodity in exchange for the unknown of a draft pick, right?
Mm-hmm.
O'Connell and McVay and Les Snead and Kwesi. I don't know.
In a division that already has great running backs and good running games.
Yeah. So I wonder if that could happen. Dalvin for a 2, re-sign Madison, and now you've got an extra 2nd round pick.
Honestly, I think there's 2 paths forward with Dalvin. Either you do that because our system doesn't require an elite running back to be successful in the run game. Or you go to Dalvin and say, you're not going to be in the team. We're either going to cut you or we're going to trade you. If you want to remain at purple, you need to take a severe pay cut.
Okay.
But at his current cap hit, especially next year's cap hit, I don't think he exists in purple. So he either takes a tremendous pay cut or he gets traded.
Okay. Let's table this discussion for the offseason because this is offseason discussion and we can't be distracted. But and I know you were going to try and see if the Rams had a 2nd round pick, but and I like Dalvin, don't get me wrong. I think he's a special player. I don't love paying that position. I don't love drafting it high and I don't love paying it.
Especially that type of money.
Yep. So I don't love that. And like the Vikings don't even just he doesn't just punish the other team. I mean, I always end the game being like, probably could have used Dalvin more. Like that's what I always think every week, could have used Dalvin more. It's like you're paying him that much money. You shouldn't be saying that after the game. You should be saying, I hope Dalvin's okay. We gave him the ball a ton. Hope he's all right.
Yep.
We're never saying
completely agree.
Yeah.
And I can't tell why that is because I don't think he's fallen off a shelf.
No.
Some people project that. I feel like it's our usage of him.
No, I think it is. I think it is the usage. And I think it's, I just think that O'Connell, I mean, he's a quarterback and he's got another quarterback. O'Connell is a quarterback by trade, and that's his mindset. And he's a play designer and a play caller and a quarterback. And he's got a quarterback playing for him who can absolutely execute anything that you would ask of a quarterback to execute that is traditionally a quarterback's job. He can do. I wouldn't ask Cousins to be a zone read or read option guy. I wouldn't ask him to be a scrambler and all that. But from the traditional sense, he can do everything you want. He can make every throw. He can make every read. He's seen it all. He's seen pressure. He's seen coverage. He's seen all of it. And no matter what offense you're in, you can ask Cousins to do it. So you got O'Connell, who's a quarterback by trade, a play caller, a play designer. He's got Cousins, and he's got Justin Jefferson. He doesn't want to run the ball.
Yeah.
And
he has Hawkinson, one of the best tight ends in the league.
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't want to do that. He wants to design explosive passing plays that stress weak secondaries or put really good secondary players in dilemmas. That's what he wants to do. He doesn't want to line up in 12 personnel or 13 personnel and run the ball a bunch. He doesn't. And everyone says they want to. And of course, if you could do that and succeed, you would just do that. That'd be the easiest way to do it. But it's not what he wants to do. So that's why I don't think they use him. And that's why I don't think they should be paying him what they're paying him. And that's why they shouldn't use a first or second round pick on a running back anymore. So
Yep. And I think now that I'm thinking about it, I think part of the reason they haven't gotten him more involved in the pass game is that I don't think they practice screens enough in training camp, because we've talked about it before. Screens are very reliant on precise timing. And I think Dalvin is elusive enough for that to be an effective strategy. But if you don't time that right, that can be a train wreck, or people can call it out and it's a wash, right? And we haven't seen a lot of screens. We've seen a few more screens as of late, but they've been mostly with a tight end, with Hawkinson. So either they practice it and they're specifically holding it close to the vest for the playoffs, or they didn't do it. But I think that's one of the biggest surprising things, I guess, from this season that I was expecting to see is Dalvin involved in the passing game, because if you get him out into space, that's a dangerous combination.
Yep.
When you think about going into the season, what assets do I have and what type of pain do I want to inflict on an opposing defense? That is one of those. Getting Dalvin in space, that's how I can crush a defense. Like, how do I make that happen? Doing a screen game and an effective one is definitely a route to making that happen. Haven't seen it thus far, but I guess knock on wood, maybe we'll see it come Giants time. But lastly, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I'm done. What you got?
I pulled up the 2023 draft picks.
Oh yeah, Rams. What do they got?
Los Angeles Rams. I'm gonna pull a Spielman special and say, let's get a second and a seventh from the Rams.
You want them to throw in that seventh? All right.
Oh yeah, good. Just a little icing on the top.
I remember when we were when I was working for the team, and it'd be draft night, and it's the second. In the old days it was a 2-day draft, now it's a 3-day, and you're trying to get out of there, like you're trying to go home on day 2, or get to the after draft, the post draft party, and like you're trying to write up the recaps and all that, and you got Spielman sitting here like getting 7 picks in the 6th and 7th round. It was impossible for us to get out of there and get to the post draft party.
Come on, Rick.
Yeah. So okay, you want to throw that 7th on there, Giles? All right, sounds good. Get those priority free agents, right? That's who they are at that point. None of those guys have draftable grades, but you don't have to compete with the other teams on the phone with signing bonuses to get them to come to your tryout camp. So okay,
this is
so
true.
A 2nd and a 7th for Dalvin to the Rams. I think we should champion that cause once the season is over. With apologies to our guy, the chef, to Dalvin. We like him, but we're wondering if maybe there's a better fit elsewhere for him. So anyway, all right, more. Vikings defense. Let's get to the grades. And while you're pulling those up, Giles, I'll do some talking too on defense. I thought a month ago there was a lot of heat on Donatel and the defense, and they're a sieve. They can't stop anyone. Fire Donatel, and we're having to defend the idea of holding on to them and how it can hurt you from an organizational standpoint and all that. So I think we're past that. I thought there was some concerning moments against the Packers, but I didn't think there was anything like categorically wrong with the approach or the defense. I don't even think they got roasted by Rodgers really that badly. So I guess I don't have a rubber stamp, pound my fist on the table take on the Vikings defense. I didn't love anything that I saw, but I didn't hate anything that I saw. I don't think it's a strong group overall, though. I think they got to get better in a lot of ways. And we've talked about what's the thing you hang your hat on? You're really good against the run. You're a little leaky against the pass, but man, no one can run on you, or vice versa. Right. Or the Chicago Bears used to do this a lot. It's like, yeah, you can get yards on them and points on them, but God, they take the ball away 3 times a game, right? When they had Urlacher and Briggs and Tillman. I mean, man, they
shut down defense.
I mean, they'd take the ball away from you. So what is the thing you hang your hat on? And the Vikings don't have that yet. They need it though here when the playoffs start. And to me, what it is Za'Darius Smith and Danielle Hunter just being a pain in the ass for the other team. That's, to me, at this point, they need to go to that and just pour their energy and their effort into that and do things around them and behind them that allow those two guys to get after the quarterback. That's what I think they should hang their hat on. And if they don't do that, I'm afraid they're just going to kind of flounder and be the weak link of the team.
Yep. And at the end of the day, you wouldn't be leading with your assets. You know what I mean? Like you walked into a fight with your biggest strength. It's like hiding them behind the fence. Like that's just that's stupid.
Yeah. And I mean, like, because it takes a lot. If those two guys are pinning their ears back and getting after you, it takes a lot to neutralize that. Like that takes a lot away from you, what you want to do, as opposed to like, if you just got a middle linebacker who plays with his hair on fire and makes every tackle, like that's like a little bit of a headache for you on offense. Like you got to take a few Advil and just deal with that and try to go to sleep and wake up the next day and you feel better. You can deal with that with all due respect to Kendricks or to guys who played like that in the past, like Zach Thomas, like you definitely, or Luke Kuechly, like those guys were really good, but like that didn't keep you up at night, losing sleep. If you got Smith and Hunter buzzing off the edge and smoking your quarterback, that is a problem. That causes you to lose sleep, and that causes you to be unable to do things that got you into the playoffs.
Yep.
So that's where I hope that they go to.
Yeah.
Now you're probably going to tell me they graded terribly, and I'm going to look like an idiot for having that opinion. I don't know how they graded against the Packers, but I think if this team makes a playoff run, Za'Darius Smith and Danielle Hunter will have good grades according to PFF. So
I do think that is a perfect transition into the defensive grades. Who do you think was the top 3 graded players on the defense?
I don't know. I didn't think about this. I thought about the offensive one because I know you're going to ask me these questions, and I had my offensive answers, and Chase stole my first one, but I got to use my second one, Hawkinson. Man, I don't know. I'm looking at the snap share, and I like it again. I like the snap share that they did. I don't know, Chase, anything stand out to you? Like, I know Bynum was around the ball a bunch, so I'm inclined to say him, but I don't really believe in Bynum, and I'm more of a Metellus guy than a Bynum guy.
Yeah, the one I'm thinking right off the bat, mainly because, like you guys said, I don't think Rodgers is really the guy that killed us. I don't think the passing game really killed us, and he's kind of Mr. Reliable as of late, according to a PFF grade. So I'm going to say Duke Shelley.
Okay.
Ding, 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 ding. He was
nice.
third highest graded player. He ended the day with a 72.4 grade. Did great in every category. If he continues this, he's absolutely earned himself another contract with the Minnesota Vikings, because I believe he's done after this year. And 2, I think he's earned himself a starting job. Huge. Which, to pause there quickly, I was partially misleading when I said the top 3. We're actually looking at positions 2 through 4. The highest graded player on defense on this past weekend was Cam Dantzler. Now, he only played a few snaps because, unfortunately, he lost his starting job. And I think that's more of a praise to Duke Shelley than it is an indictment on Cameron Dantzler, because he ended the day with an 85.9 grade, and he had 7 snaps, which it's not 1 snap, it was 7. He did good when he was out there, but he lost the starting job, which is... I don't know. I have a lot of feelings about that.
Okay. So, and this maybe again is another off-season topic, but I need to be more measured than I've been in my past about this, because I was in the building and I knew the guys and I had a lot of ground to stand on with some opinions like this, but I'm just not a big, so I don't know him. I don't know Cam Dantzler personally, but from a player, I'm not a big Dantzler, the player guy. I don't like it. I just don't like how it looks and whatever. I really like a Caleb Evans, who we haven't gotten to see a lot. And I'm all about Duke Shelley. I mean, what a find. I mean,
seriously,
what a find.
Phenomenal.
I mean, this is not like finding a will linebacker or a free safety. I mean, you found a corner.
Yep.
I mean, you draft
at
corners.
Bare minimum above average, if not elite in some categories.
Yeah. So I'm on the Duke Shelley train for sure. Not surprised to hear he played well in the game. How about Peterson? I want to say there's a chance another corner played well, Giles and Chase, because you look at the box score and there aren't any receivers for Green Bay who lit it up. So tell me how Peterson graded.
Peterson did well, but was technically middle of the road from a PFF grade standpoint. He ended the day with a 67.0 grade. Did very, very well in tackling. He had a few pass rush snaps that dinged him quite a bit. Otherwise, I think he would have been graded higher.
Okay. Tell me about Tomlinson.
He was top 5 Graded out at a
surprised.
72.0 grade. Did very well across the board, but not in the top 3.
Okay. So I whiff on Peterson and I whiff on. I'm not going to call Tomlinson a whiff. He was top 5, and I thought he looked good in the game too. He didn't play a ton.
He had 63 snaps, or I'm sorry, 34 snaps. I was looking at camera.
Yep. I don't know. Fill me in. Who is it?
You were close with Dalvin Tomlinson.
Oh, really? So we're in the interior. Tonga.
I wish he graded about average. He did horrible in tackling. He had some missed tackles that dinged him a lot. He did great across the board except for tackling.
Phillips was awful last week. Did he bounce back?
He bounced back in a big way. He had a 73.4 grade.
Okay.
Did great across the board. He was our second overall graded player on defense. So
good
great to see him coming back and bringing back the Avengers gauntlet mitt. So, excited to see him on the upward trajectory.
That is good. I think he's got a little grit to him. I think he's skilled and he moves well and all that, but I like his grit, and he's been part of a program in Buffalo that's sort of they've been winners lately. So I like his pedigree. And I like what he brings to. I think he's a part of the locker room chemistry and culture that's been so positive for the Vikings. I think he's a part of that. Good to hear that he bounced back. Out of curiosity, how did the edge rushers grade out?
Before we get to the edge rushers, let's finalize on the number 1. I'm giving away that they're not in the top 3. Harrison Smith. Ding, 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 ding. He had a 74.5 grade. He was phenomenal in tackling. He was the best on the team. He was our number 1 overall graded player. But to get back to your point among edge rushers, woof.
Yeah.
I mean woof with a capital W. Yeah. There were, I believe, 104 qualified edge rushers in the NFL this past season. And both of them were the worst 2.
Come on. What are we doing?
I don't know what to take away. Like, at this point, I have a lot of feelings, but that is very clearly a misuse of them, because if you told me they're both healthy, I believe they're 2 of the most elite defensive players, not even at their position, but in the entire game. They're elite defensive players, and they are the worst at their positions against this. There was some viral memes going around the internet with Danielle Hunter backing off into coverage against Christian Watson. Our coverage performed much better this game. I don't know if we were intentionally sacrificing pass rush to improve coverage, but Danielle Hunter and Za'Darius Smith were horrible. They ended the day with a 42.5 grade for Za'Darius Smith and a 36.9 grade for, a 42.8 grade for Danielle Hunter. Absolutely atrocious.
Giles, you're kind of jumping out of your skin here a little bit. Are you okay?
I don't know. I don't know how to feel about this, because if you would have told me that both would have been healthy through the entire season, I would have guessed that we would have been number 1 in sacks, number 1 in pressures, and that we would be one of the most feared defensive lines in football. If you have one of those players, I think you can build a defense around that. And we have 2.
Well, that they need to be really good for the Vikings to advance in the playoffs. Those 2 guys got to be good. I'm sorry. Yeah. I mean, Harrison Phillips and Tomlinson can be awesome, and it's not going to win you games. It's just not. It's not going to win you a playoff game. It can help you win 9 or 10 games in a regular season, but that's fine. They already got 12. They already did that. You got to have isolated standout performers in big moments in the playoffs to win these isolated games. It's got to be your edge rushers.
Oh, 100%. And now that I've come back to earth, and now that I've removed my emotion from the conversation, when you look at all the snaps, I think the biggest issue that we're seeing among the edge rushers is twofold. One, they're backing off into coverage too much. And anytime you're throwing Danielle Hunter into coverage, I get why you're doing it schematically, but you are wasting him. You are wasting a bar of gold, because he is that great. But two, when they're doing their plays on defense and when they're rushing the passer, I see us trying to get too creative, where we're doing these elaborate, exotic pass rushes that are getting home, but they're not getting home near fast enough. Where, like, for example, Za'Darius Smith might be lining up against the left tackle, and he'll run over to the right tackle and rush the passer. Really cool, exotic idea, but it doesn't have enough time to develop.
Yeah.
Like we are trying to get too creative. I get that you need to be creative and you can't just bull rush every time, but we are trying too exotic of blitzes or pass rushes.
So I'm with you. I know what you're saying. What about the concept that Zimmer came up? The double, mugging the A gap, double A gap pressure look with Barr and Kendricks. What about something like that where it's like Hunter and Smith both lined up on one edge, both on one side.
Yep.
And something like that. And then, you know what, if you want to drop them into coverage to be different, do it when you do that and then bring pressure off the other side, because they're certainly going to slide protection to the side that you've doubled up on. So I wonder if things like, could try some things like that. Wrinkles like that, if they don't work, they can maybe be a problem, but you don't have to just like keep doing them. If it doesn't work, don't do it anymore. Yeah. But like do it. And if it works, now you got something. So
you've hung around a lot more NFL teams than I have. When you look at something like this, there's only one of two things that can be happening. Either Ed Donatel is trying to force players into his scheme and doesn't care if they fit into it, where he's far more scheme focused than he is player focused, or they are intentionally trying to cover up other things and sacrificing pass rush, where they're saying, I understand that we're not going to get home every time, we're not going to get pass rush, but we're doing it so we'll make up for other things. Like, unless there's a secret option C here, it has to be one of those two things. Am I right?
No, yeah, you're right. I think you are right about that, and I think it's the latter. I think it's we're going to give up this to be better over here. But like, I don't know what that is, because by the way, the Packers literally ran you over in the run game. I mean, so it wasn't to be better against the run, right?
Yep.
And Danielle was always a really good run defender in Zim's scheme.
Very good. Yeah.
And that's not necessarily what you want him thinking about all the time, but I was concerned with how much Green Bay ran the ball, how well they were able to run it, especially if you're going to play the Giants in the first round, because that's exactly what they want to do.
Yep. Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's a crime against humanity to have Za'Darius Smith and Danielle Hunter being used like this, where this is a hot take, and I think I've mentioned this before on previous episodes. I think after the season's over, even if we win the Super Bowl, knock on wood, I think we need to do one of two things with Danielle Hunter. You either need to beef him up and put him inside and have him become a defensive tackle, more like an Aaron Donald type.
Like a 5-tech. Oh, okay.
Or maybe even 5 technique. But like, you are moving him inside if you're going to maintain our scheme. If we're going to be a 3-4 defense, he's going to be a defensive tackle.
I'm thinking like Willie McGinnis, Richard Seymour, right? In the Patriots scheme. Okay.
Yep. But you're prioritizing getting them their hand in the dirt. Or you trade him for 2 first-round picks.
Right.
Because I think he is not worth the cap hit. And even the emotional toil you're putting on Vikings fans to have him back off into coverage, because really he wasn't big enough to play defensive tackle, so they had to put him at outside linebacker. And in this scheme, the outside linebacker backs off into coverage. That's really what happened here, right? Now, Za'Darius Smith can do that a lot more effectively, in my opinion. A little bit smaller than Danielle Hunter,
and he's got more.
You need to do one of those two things.
And he's been doing that. Yeah, he's been in this type of scheme his whole career. It's his first year in it. Right.
Correct. So, yeah. So I think one of those two things need to happen, because even Danielle Hunter's build, I don't think is really an outside linebacker. Maybe correct me if you would disagree, but I feel like I'd much rather have him bulk up and pull him inside and be a defensive tackle essentially, or trade him for 2 first-round picks and then use that to go replace him.
100% agree with you. I'm thinking quickly of 2 teams. Again, let's diverge to an off-season podcast episode talking point here. The 2 teams that come to mind immediately in terms of front office fits to make a deal like this happen are Denver, because George Payton is there.
George Payton. Yeah.
Although I don't know that Danielle would be a scheme fit in Denver. I don't know.
They're still a 3-4, I think.
Yeah. Yep. So that might not be great. But they're going to have a new head coach. So they may be a 4-3 team. Seattle. John Schneider has history not just with the Vikings, but Kwesi comes from the Niners, and so you got some things that cross there. You've got a 40 front, even man front there, Pete Carroll, and I think the Seahawks could use some help on defense. So how about Seattle with a 2 first round picks? Send Danielle over there, and you get a couple firsts. Got it.
Yep.
I'm sorry,
And I
but
don't think we're going to be able to afford him next year, considering how many other people we have to play or
yeah.
to pay. So I wouldn't be against that, considering how he's being used right now.
And it's weird to be sitting here being like, I should probably trade Dalvin. I should probably trade Danielle. I think a lot of fans are like, geez, you're trading away all of our good, like we're 12-4 guys. I know that, but you can't just count on doing this over again next year. You gotta be changing and evolving, and you gotta, these are holdovers from Spielman and Zimmer, and that doesn't make them bad. In fact, it's a big reason why they're good, but you got to do this your own way. And if you're going to be a 3-4 defense, I just don't see Dalvin, or I don't see Danielle being on the team unless you do what you said, Giles. You bulk him up and continue to cross train him, and then eventually solely train him to play inside. So
in fact, he's done well when he's played inside.
Yeah,
like when going against guards. Like, I mean, he's done very, very well in the past, especially under Zimmer.
You'd figure in a pass rushing situation, it's a huge advantage to him to go up against a guard, less athletic. There's less room for him to operate, but he's going up against a physically inferior athlete. Going against a guard. So, definitely some things to clean up there on the Vikings defense, not just for the Bears game, but for the playoffs. Who were the worst graded players for the Vikings on defense? Oh, you went through them, the two edge rushers.
Yep. And Shannon Sullivan. He graded out at a 36.6.
It's a bummer for him playing his former team. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And I think that might have been part of it. There's too much emotion. But to paint the color blue in the sky, not many teams do have a great cornerback in that position. When you think about the slot cornerback, I mean, can you name many teams that have a good cornerback in the slot position?
Yeah, not anymore. I used to be able to name more of them. I think the Vikings had a good one when they had Munnerlyn.
Yeah, that's fair.
I thought he was very good at that. And yeah, I mean, I can name some from the past. Winfield was really good at that position. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I remember preparing for games when I was still with the club, and I'd sit with PA and we'd fill out the other team's depth chart and our depth chart and just prepare for the call. It was always the way starters are listed is it's 4 defensive linemen, 3 linebackers, and 4 secondary players. But like we always would go and watch tape if we didn't know, or always denote who the nickel corner was, because the way the game has been evolving, the nickel corner is on the field more often than your third linebacker,
Correct.
So, so the nickel corner is always an important player to identify. And consequently it's an important player to have on your team to be good in that position. And I don't think the Vikings are horrible there, but no. I don't think you've got something that you're really proud of at nickel corner right now. So
correct. Yeah. And if I'm going to have to pick a weakness on my team, because every team has a weakness, it's just a matter of reality. When you choose a strength, you also inversely choose a weakness where you only can have strengths in so many places. I'd maybe want it in the nickel cornerback position. I mean, maybe a middle linebacker if you're having to pick, but like it's not towards the top of the list in terms of positions that have to be good.
Yep. And it's pretty rare when you go into a matchup and you're like, we don't have a nickel corner, so we're screwed here. It's pretty rare. You might have done that against the Saints when they had Marquise Colston, right? Yeah. Like that might have happened to you. The Colts, when they had Dallas Clark, you'd probably feel like you're in trouble if you don't have a good nickel corner there, because he was a tight end, but he really was like a third receiver, played in the slot a bunch. So yeah, I kind of agree with you there. If you're good at corner but weak at nickel, I think you're fine with that. Or good at safety but weak at nickel, I think you're fine with that, right? Yeah. And if you have a really good pass rush, you can be fine with that too. So, all right.
Game of trade-offs.
Yep, that's right. Anything else defensively before we move on?
No, that's a wrap.
All right. I don't want to spend too much time on the Bears. I mean, it's Nathan Peterman, Justin Fields injured, so Nathan Peterman's going to start. I know it's at Soldier Field. I know it's cold. But with the quarterback situation being what it is, won't surprise me if the Vikings win this game. Even less surprising would be if they win the game and it's inconsequential. So I'll be curious to see what O'Connell's strategy is with who he plays and how much those guys play. Any insights, any hunches on that topic?
I have a hunch that we're not going to play many starters because, like you mentioned, more than likely it's not going to lean us one way or the other when it comes to seeding. However, if there is not optimal progress when it comes to Kirk Cousins and Chris Reed, I expect those two to play a little bit more during the game to simply get live reps to make sure that he's prepared to play in a playoff game if necessary. Because even if Bradbury comes back, Chris Reed will now be our second string center.
Right. So you got to be ready. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So I think that might be something they want to test drive as much as possible.
If you're going to do that, Giles, I think you got to keep Darisaw out there too then.
I would venture to say as well.
I mean, I don't think you want Cousins out there without Darisaw. Do you? I mean,
I don't. Yeah, I think you're right, because then you're asking for an injury, and that's a much bigger conversation. I completely agree. So, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to move on to a bigger picture topic. What did you have something on this?
Lastly, is Justin Jefferson.
Yeah.
Do you play him?
So are you going with like, where is he at for the record and all that stuff, right? Or 2,000 yards? I don't know, man. I mean, honestly, you do not want the inmates running the asylum here, right? Like, but I would go to the player and really gauge the player's mindset on it. I would factor in what the player wants into my decision. I'm not saying I would let Justin Jefferson make the decision, but if Jefferson says to me, "Yeah, whatever, coach, we'll take another run at it next year. I want to be. Let's get ready for the Giants." I'd sit him. But if he said to me, like, "I don't know, it'd be kind of cool," or if he's got some big financial incentive to get there and you want to do right by him, I'd factor that in too. So I feel like I'm riding the fence. So I'll get off the fence and say, if we were making this decision as a committee and it was time to vote, I would not play him. That would be my vote.
I would tend to agree with you, because he is 229 yards away from hitting 2,000, and that's a big game. I mean, technically plausible, but if he was at like 105, I maybe would be leaning slightly more in the other position, but 229 is hard to ask for.
Well, especially if you're thinking about sitting Cousins, right? So
correct, yeah.
I guess it's a package deal, and I'm okay with playing him. Like practice all week, like you're going to start, go through pregame warmups like you're going to start the game, play whatever, 1 series, 2 series, 20 plays, whatever you want, and then pull them. I'm cool with that, because now you go through the motions, you stay sharp and all that. So maybe that's a good little compromise. Yeah, you're not going to get Jefferson the record, but at least you kept the guy sharp and in game form.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I think that's important to try to keep him sharp.
So the game is not entirely inconsequential, because if the Vikings win and the Niners lose, the Niners host the Cardinals. If that happens, the Vikings are the 2 seed. And that is a big deal, because you will then host a playoff game. If you win the first round, you will also host the second round, right? Instead of going to San Francisco. If you beat the Giants, then you go to San Francisco. In this scenario where you won and the Niners lost to close the season, you're hosting San Francisco, which is a much different ball game if you're the Vikings. However, that would also mean that you would play the Packers if the Packers beat the Lions. Or I believe the Lions would be the 7th seed if they win, correct? If the Lions make it, I think they would be the 7th seed. So
if the Lions win, they need the Seahawks to lose.
Right. But they would be the 7th seed, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So
Correct.
I don't know. I mean, I think you'd rather play the Giants than the Lions or the Packers. Do we agree with that, or is it more of a toss-up maybe than I'm letting on?
I completely agree. I'm just trying to decide what's more valuable: playing a harder team in round 1, but securing a home field advantage for round 2. Obviously, if you don't make it out of first round, you're screwed.
Okay, so very good point, Giles. And I would rather play a harder opponent in the first round, knowing if I win, I'm at home in the second round, than play an easier opponent in the first round, knowing I'm going to be on the road when I beat that easier opponent. I really would. So
especially the variance between someone like the Lions and the Giants. They're fairly similar in my mind in a lot of categories. They're different teams, but like they scare me an equal amount.
Agreed.
Where different matchups, sure, but I think both are winnable games. They don't scare me like, oh, we're going to get trucked.
Yep.
Versus if you have to go into San Fran, that scares me.
No thanks.
I also think that if we're gonna make the Packers and the Lions these monsters in our minds, I think San Francisco has to too. Because if San Francisco loses, then we're getting in the second round. We're still at home and we're getting the Cowboys or the Buccaneers.
Okay.
So I think that's something to think of too.
Okay. I'll hear that. Yeah, I'll hear that. Scoreboard watching definitely in play as the Vikings try and figure out they know where they're going to play, but who they're going to play in the first round. But spoiler alert is that I think it's like a 90% chance that it will be the Giants at US Bank Stadium in the first round of the playoffs. A rematch of a game a couple of weeks ago, and not one that I would say will be a blowout or anything like that, but I think the Vikings will be a 4, 5, 6 point favorite, something like that, I'm guessing I'm going to predict them to win that game when we have that week's Wobcast 2.0 episode. So, but we will see. We normally do like score and game predictions. I don't know that it's worth doing it here for this Vikings Bears game. We don't know who's going to play. It should be a win either way. But really it's all about getting healthy and gearing up for that first round playoff game. That's going to do it here for episode 17 of the Wobcast 2.0. Great stuff from Giles and Chase as usual. And again, we'd be remiss not to mention one more time before we go. We want to send all of our best to Damar Hamlin, to the Bills and to the Bengals and to everyone who was involved in that and saw that. And it's weighing heavily on their minds. So first and foremost, we want the best for Damar. Hopefully we get some really good news on that front here this week, and then we can enjoy another fun weekend and the last regular season weekend of football in the National Football League. So for Giles and for Chase, I am Wobby signing off for now. Episode 17 of the Wobcast 2.0 is over, but we'll be back next week, and we hope you join us and continue listening. You can find the Wobcast 2.0 wherever you find all your other favorite podcasts: Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We are on YouTube at Wobby. On Twitter is where you can find me and tell me about all my opinions and how they're wrong and they stink, or if you like them. We love that conversation, so we hope you engage with us there as well. You can email the show, therealwobcast@gmail.com. For Giles and Chase, this is Wobby signing off for now. Skol Vikings.